welcome back to the Life Legacy podcast. Today is going to be a special one. We have Brock Painter that we're bringing on, and there are tons of reasons why we're bringing him on. One, he is the founder of Neuromastery, which he's helping hundreds of men grow and change their lives to be better people and maximize their potential. Two, he is a neurobehavioral
I do behavioral neuroscience principles.
Yes,
That's
sir.
how you break those down.
Yeah. And Brock, you created a company called Neuromastery, and at Neuromastery, you help ambitious individuals build mind and body resilience. Out of all the things you could have done, why did you do that?
That's a deep question. It runs deep in my bones. I remember when I was younger, I never was the kid who struggled, but I also wasn't the kid who excelled, which often left me, I was the king of average in almost every way that you could, see the word. I was the 4-string corner at my high school football team. I had a 3.0 GPA, and that brought up a lot of things for me because I was never bad enough to where people cared and felt like they needed to take care of me, and I was never good enough to get noticed. And so it was often that I know what it feels like to be lonely in a crowded room and live in quiet desperation. And that pushed me to really search internally to understand myself in a better way, to really make a more impact. And as I've grown older, I started to learn a lot of my unhealthy and toxic behaviors that were self-sabotaging me. And being lonely in a crowded room is not other people's problem. It was mine from the get. But I had these crutches that I would hold on to because I thought they were keeping me safe, but they were really crippling me. And so over time, as I started to grow, I realized how much of an impact that could make in so many other men's life, because I think that's a real thing. A lot of men are not necessarily the anxious one or the depressed one or the one who struggles that needs the help or even excelling. They just feel like they're stuck, living in quiet desperation, hoping someone or something comes and saves them, waiting for that next moment to where the grass is greener. You often say, if I can just get to here, if this can just work out, then everything will be okay. But what if everything was okay now? And in that moment where you can find that presence, you can really start to take on challenges, and not because it's going to feel some sort of insecurity in yourself or make you better than you are. It's just to help you become a person you're proud of.
So how do you take a person with helping all these men? Like, how do you actually take someone from being that quiet person in the room to the one where they're like, you know what? I have full potential. I believe in myself, and I want to help others in that quiet room.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing that you have to we have 3 phases, and we call it neuro-accelerated programming. The first phase is bringing awareness, because here's the thing with awareness that a lot of people misunderstand is often when we feel anxiety or we feel depression, we think it's like the meat and the potatoes of the meal, or it's the thing to be worked on. Like, oh, I have to fix my depression, I have to fix my anxiety, and it's something to be changed. And it's not. When you look at those, they're symptoms. They're signals to your body that says, hey, something's amiss. When you're feeling depression, it's your body telling you, hey, I don't like the character you've chosen to play in this game of life. If you're feeling anxiety, it's I don't feel capable of what's coming my way. And so I feel like I have to stress. And your body's trying to tell you this. And so when I'm working with someone, I really start to dive into that side of how you can really start to understand these emotions and what they're trying to tell you. Because here's the thing. The trees that touch heaven have the roots that touch hell. Always. In every aspect of life. And you cannot go to heaven and feel happiness to the full extent if you're also not willing to go to hell. And so you have to be willing to go to hell to then understand what heaven is. And in that shadow work, when you really start to understand yourself, that's where you can find peace. And when I define peace, it's when what you do, what you think, and what you say are all the same. It's not a state of happiness. It's not a state of sadness. It's not a state of, joy or any of those. It's just a state of understanding that you are where your feet are. And you do the things you say you're going to do. You say the things you want to say, and you think the things you want to think. And when you can do that, then taking on challenges and living the life you want to becomes almost systematic. And that's where, after phase 1 of awareness, we go into building the habits that are actually going to help you have a mind and a body that will work for you rather than against you. We start to work on the physical pillar where we're, building exercise routines, nutrition, things like that. I'm working with the emotions, the belief systems. We actually start to put in the habits, because you can't start to build the habits and self-improve until you've done the shadow work first, until you've healed. And so that's where we start to really build those habits out. And then we have the community where we're getting together every month, and we're, having that reinforcement of people where you can see some are where you're at, some are a little bit further along on the journey, and some are, a little bit further behind that need your help. And I think all of those are important to understand, that we've all been there, done that, and that there's people just like you. And then we have the art of becoming. And that's where you take on challenges consistently and effortlessly. And we start to build the person that you want to where you can look at yourself in the mirror, completely naked, and say, wow, Jaxon, like, I'm so proud of the person you've become. And that's my goal of what I'd hope to create with the program.
That's powerful. Just you can tell Brock knows super in depth like what he's doing and how he's doing it, which when you're building a company, like those processes and understanding deeply like what matters is everything, right? So when he talks about like getting naked in front of the mirror, Brock, I've seen his people that he's worked with, and he takes people from, like an average body type to like Baywatch, where these these people are looking good. And like what does that actually take for like in the physical aspect?
I mean, the biggest thing is expanding the vision. Like, if you think the physical realm is a point A to point B journey, you'll lose every time. Like, when I start working with a client, the first thing I say to them is like, I need you to imagine yourself doing these very things that you're learning right now when you're 90 years old. Like, and there's been multiple studies on this, because, like, for example, they did this study at Harvard where they took 2 kids learning an instrument, okay? And they made one group play for 2 hours a day. They made another group play however they wanted, however long they wanted to, okay? And then if you were to look at that, most people originally would say, okay, the ones who played 2 hours obviously got better, right? But honestly, neither group did better than the other. The biggest factor that showed which group was going to do the best was based on how long they saw themselves playing the instrument.
In the future, like,
Yep, because they were willing to fail. When you see yourself doing something forever, you're like, I don't want to get this wrong. And also, it doesn't matter if I miss the day, because there's always tomorrow, and I'm going to be doing this tomorrow and the next day and the next day and forever. And so what happens is the day stops being the emphasis and the life does. And so in that, you allow yourself to fail. And just like the trees can't touch heaven unless the roots can touch hell, you cannot have success unless you're also willing to fail. And so when you look at somebody that's trying to build the habit, I could give you the best workout program in the world, but that's not what's going to solve your problems. It's not the workout program. It's not how fast or how hard you're training. It's none of that.
the vision.
It's how long you see yourself doing it.
So what is like your physical goal throughout your life?
I really look up to this guy. His name's Nick Bear. He runs BPN supplements, but I really don't have like a physical goal that says like this is where I want to arrive, because I really don't feel like I ever will. I just love trying to set goals and hit them.
Yeah.
Just to see if I can do it. Like, let's
that.
just see how far I can take this thing. And that's honestly the extent of my thought process there.
Yeah. And as Brock's saying that, it's like, oh, I wonder if he's done like a marathon or two. He's done half marathons. He just qualified for Boston. He's done ultra marathons, and you even did 100-miler, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right now you're training for an Ironman. So, like, this is one of the David Goggins of Utah, like pushing yourself hard. This is a great example to look up to. Going to the analogy of the tree that is touching heaven and hell, and you have to experience a little bit of both to understand it. Take me through a little bit of both sides of that. Like, what's been some of your hell points that's let you have a taste of heaven?
So just some of my hell experiences is My mentality now, just to kind of preface this, is it's not taste a little bit of both. I want all of it. I want all of the pain. I want all of the happiness. And I want everything that this world has to offer. And I'm not trying to shun away any of it, ever. Because if I do, I lose myself every time. So where I have had these pivotal moments in my life is like, for example, I remember as a kid, like I said, I was never that bad and I was never that great. I was right in the middle. But I was always the kid who had a positive attitude, and I was very easy to stay, right there with people, which is why I often would, people would always make jokes at me. And this isn't, playing the victim card or saying pity me, but it was a moment where, like, I remember I was sitting outside a Hollywood Video. This is when movie video stores still existed. And I was bawling to my mom about why people were so mean. And I didn't understand it. And they would always tell me, like, it's okay if we make fun of you because we know you can take it. And people would say that often. And I couldn't take it. And that's where I would be in those rooms where I was lonely in a crowded room. And I know that feeling. And that happened. I remember there was this one time when I was in high school. I always loved to throw the parties. I loved to have my friends over to my house every weekend. As I grew older, I learned that came from an unhealthy place because I felt like if I didn't invite them, if I didn't throw the party, then they wouldn't come. And I remember one week I decided to test that. And nobody texted me. Nobody called. I was alone. And I remember so I loved football. And I was obsessed with football. That was my favorite thing in the whole world. And, like, I worked so hard. I could tell you I outworked the whole team. Like, I was waking up every day. I had my dad outside throwing me 100 passes, and I was trying to get so good at it. To the point to where I played with, like, a recklessness abandonment. Got a bunch of concussions. Junior year, I couldn't play anymore because the doctor called my coach and told him I couldn't play. Right? I had a bunch of health issues. I was getting bloody noses, and I'd pass out or throw up, and it was just kind of a rough time. But it was hard because from one day to the next, I had all my friends, and then it was gone. I didn't have any of that anymore.
So from your head injuries, you had to get football taken away from you, which also essentially took your friends away.
Because they were all at football practice. And so I also lost my identity. And I remember there was one night in particular, and this was a pivotal moment of my life. I was sitting there. I was laying on my bedroom floor. I had the sad song playing and everything. And I just thought to myself, I was like, you don't need somebody to come and save you. You can save yourself. You're the one who put your running shoes on every day. You're the one who caught those 100 passes. You're the one who showed up for yourself every single day, and you can do that now. And so I immediately got myself off the floor, and I went and wrote a list, and I said, I'm going to really get to know myself. And I wrote down 300 things that I liked about the world. It could be anything. Like, I liked steak. I, liked this person. I like to be around positive people, whatever. I wrote 300 things. And then I also made another list of 300 things that I didn't like, things that made me uncomfortable, things I hated about myself and the world and everything. And I decided that I was going to go towards, so I was going to spend 80% of my time in the things that I liked, and I was going to try to intentionally put myself there. But I was going to spend 20% of my life going towards the things that I absolutely dreaded. And I was going to do that until I could become comfortable in them. And then that's where, those were some pivotal moments that really helped me grow into what I do today.
You talking about like the getting into growth and focusing on what you're great at, and then that 20% of where it's like, okay, I gotta look into this and dive into something that's uncomfortable. That typical phrase, I remember it was like my Twitter bio, was there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. And I had a best friend, and that was like our motto. So any opportunity we had to grow that uncomfortable zone to grow the growth, we were always pushing each other. And I remember there was one time that we were doing like a big backflip off a cliff. Nothing important, but my friend's on the edge of that cliff, and he's like, yo, I don't think I can do it. And I just screamed that quote to him. He's like, yep, let's go. And something I've noticed since trying to do that since about 7th or 8th grade, my capacity to do uncomfortable things to a lot of people is very high, since that was such a strong focal point. And from what you've been saying already, I know that your comfort zone is probably way larger than the typical person, because you've been willing to be uncomfortable. And so on that list, what were a couple of the things that you put down, if you don't mind saying?
Um, so the one I'm still working on is seafood. I hate
See,
I hated seafood. I hate fish, and it's really hard. And that's one that, like, every time that I eat it, I get I get sick. I remember on the mission. So me and Jackson went on the same mission, and we were in the desert, so we never got fish, hardly ever. I got it twice on my mission, and I dreaded it. And I remember the time that I did, I would ask the members for a habanero pepper, just so I could burn my mouth right before I ate the fish. And like habanero peppers, like
it's the
they,
real deal.
oh yeah, I was like, just give me it, and I would bite it, and then I would eat as much food as I could. So that was one. Another one is I really had a hard time with like sarcastic people. Like I hated sarcasm because I always felt like it was just an excuse for people to be mean.
You would have hated me in high school. But keep going.
But I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have hated you. I felt like it was normal, but it was me problem, not a you problem. You know, the sarcasm was, well, why was it affecting me?
Well, I think there's a couple things with comedy. The easiest comedy is bringing someone down. So if you ever hear someone make a joke about someone else to be the funny guy in the room, their comedy, like their level of comedy just isn't that great. So I think there's levels of it, and sarcasm is great, but if you're bringing other people down to be funny, you're still a loser.
Right.
Like,
well, but
shows insecurity.
Some of it too was just I was sensitive. And I learned that as I got older. Right? Like people weren't trying to be mean.
Yeah.
And a lot of times sometimes they meant what they said, and sometimes they didn't, but it all came back to me.
Yeah.
A lot of it was that I was sensitive to what they were saying, which it hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've learned is that, everybody's trying their best in their own sphere. Everybody is doing the best with what they have. And for me to sit there and judge them and say, you're rude, you're this, is all just trying to feel some insecurity of myself to make me feel better, that I'm on a higher level, or, more spiritual, or more nice or kind, right? And when you really look at life, none of that really exists. We're all just trying our best. And one of the biggest factors that I've found is just education.
Understanding.
Deeper
understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I agree completely with that. I don't know the exact quote, but it's pretty much like if you don't love someone, or if you don't like someone, you just don't understand them enough.
Yeah, it's Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, which he's one of my favorite historical figures ever.
Yeah, I love that.
You've been through a little bit of trauma, it sounds like, and you talk about trauma, and there's some steps you can take to get through trauma. Someone that's got to work through trauma, what would you say to him?
Just don't be afraid. The fear is going to make it bigger than it is. Because here's the thing is like, going back to the comfort zone, right? Like, the comfort zone can be a personal hell. People forget that. Because what happens is, just diving into the neuroscience so we can create a baseline of where I'm coming from, okay? So what happens is your body desperately craves familiarity and safety. Like, those are its number one priorities in you, okay? So what happens is, let's say you have this equilibrium, like a normal baseline of where your body likes to exist, okay? So over time, that gets knocked out of whack, okay? We all do. But what happens is, so let's say it gets knocked out of whack to anxiety, your body's going to crave going back to what's normal, like feeling peace, feeling kindness, feeling abundant, right? It's going to go back to that because that's what it knows. But what happens is if it gets knocked out of whack enough, your body says, well, this is our new normal. This is what's familiar to us. This is what our life is. This is what's safe. This is what's familiar. So we're going to crave this now. So now when you go to peace, your body can crave to go back to anxiety and depression and sadness and, feeling like a victim, feeling like the world's out to get you, like people are talking bad about you. And the thing is you're going to get out of life whatever you notice. So if you notice things enough times, it's automatically going to adjust. And your body is constantly making these changes everywhere you go. Okay? And so that can become your new comfort zone as that becomes what's familiar to you. So one of the things that you have to do when you start to venture into the unknown, like when you're talking about a growth zone, the growth zone, a lot of people try to give labels as what's good, bad, comfortable, uncomfortable, easy, hard, right? Honestly, when you're dealing with emotions, all of that is irrelevant. It doesn't matter because your emotions are a very unorganized, unlogical world that don't make sense. You can't give sense to a nonsensical world, and we try to interpret it with all these labels, but all they do is keep us stuck because that's where our body wants to stay. So what you do is you start to then knock it back out of whack. Okay? So in the beginning, your body's not going to want to go to peace because it feels uncomfortable there. It may not like happiness. Like if you notice when somebody has experienced a lot of trauma, they're going to be like, when they do feel happiness, they're almost like, well, why is this here? What do I do? So you have to knock it out of whack enough to where that becomes your new normal. Because we have these default patterns of behaviors that may not be in our best interest. And the hard thing about that is you don't know where they came from. When you look at the subconscious world, it's automatically making these changes without your consent. And most of it happened from the ages of 0 to 7. Like you have different wave states as you grow. Like right now we're operating mostly in alpha and beta waves. Okay, but when you're 0 to 7,
alpha?
It's just basically you're functioning, thinking, growing, like you're basically problem solving is the essence. But when you're 0 to 7, you're in a theta wave state, which is where your brain is very moldable, very emotional, and that's where most of our brain and patterns and habits and behaviors and beliefs come from. And if we don't know what's been put there or how it got there, we don't know how it's affecting us. We don't know what our normal is. We like to think that our normal is everybody else's normal, and that's the reality of the world, but it's not. And that default state may not be in your best interest, right? Like the belief for me when I was growing up was that if I can just provide a fun enough time for everybody, if I can just be positive enough, then I will be liked. Then I will be loved. That was the connection. That was my normal. Until I realized that that wasn't true, right? And I had to realize that I was enough with or without those things. But that felt very uncomfortable. That did not feel like me. It did not feel normal. And that's a hard place to be because going into that place consistently, it takes a lot of effort. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from as I start to, dive into those things that are uncomfortable. Because, traumas can be these big, massive things, but they can also just be little moments that were pivotal in your life that you say, I don't ever want that to happen again.
Yeah. Next thought with kind of what you're talking about, we're diving into the harder hardships. What have been your biggest growing moments that helped you get to heaven, touch and enjoy heaven?
Yeah. It's all one conglomerate, right? It's all line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. Like, it was never one big moment where everything made sense. I'm still on the journey. I don't think I've all the way arrived to heaven, and I also don't think I've gone deep enough to hell. I think I have a lot to go in that journey. But there have been some moments, the ones that I'm sharing have been pivotal. And honestly, a lot of what we're building this company and things like that have been pivotal moments where you read a book and you're like, oh, that makes sense. You listen to a mentor, oh, that makes sense. And you pull all these little moments. Like everybody waits for this one big moment for their life to change, and it's not. It's a million small changes in one direction that add up over a lot of time. And as those add up, then you really become the person that you want to.
Yeah. You brought up mentors. I know you have a couple. Tell me a little bit about them and how they've influenced you.
Oh, there's they've influenced everything for me. Like, I was a lost college student, you know. I remember going into college.
Who isn't a lost college student
Yeah.
at some point?
Yeah, like I remember I got off the mission. I was excited to be there, and the world was my oyster, and I was just ready to go, 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 go. And I got there, and I remember, not knowing what to do. I joined this class called Pro Sales because I was going to go into sales, and I figured that would be a good skill to have. So I was going to do that. So I went to Pro Sales. I met this Dr. Sterling Boone, and he all of a sudden connected me to this guy. His name was Brady Murray. Brady Murray was my first introduction to the coaching world. He's not even a coach. He's a financial advisor, but he's done really well. And he's done Ironman. He started this company called Rods. Really cool guy. But he was the first advice that I ever gotten from anybody. And it was so powerful that I was like, I want all of this. and I just started like going on a rampage, reaching out to these people that I looked up to. And some of the ones that have been the most pivotal, one was James Garrett. He's a neuroscientist who does a lot of public speaking, teaching companies how to create productivity. He has a program called Fun Comfortable.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, he's kind of a goofy guy, but he's super cool and is really good at what he does. And he helped me really understand the neuroscience of what works and what doesn't, and how to help your body make progress. And then he also helped me a lot on the business side. I had another one. His name was Tony Vernon. Tony, we met in Florida. He runs this place called Hippocrates Health and Wellness Center. And in that place, what they do is they heal people who are dying from terminal illnesses, whether that be heart disease or cancer or whatever. And what they do is they help feed them different types of food. They help them go through therapy. They are working with them one-on-one to build the habits that are going to help their body regrow, and a lot of belief systems. And learning from him, he helped me really understand the mind and the body, and how to help them function together, and also how to work with people and understand them and what tools work and which ones don't. And that was a really pivotal moment too.
So what tools do work?
How long do we got? No. Honestly, the tools that work is, the biggest thing is setting a vision, knowing what it is that you want, because a diluted focus only creates diluted results. And so if you don't know what you want, it doesn't matter. I think we always want to operate out of a place of need. That's that default state of safety, right? We always hear, oh, I need to do this. I have to do this. I should do this. And a lot of times we feel like if we don't say those things, then we're going to be shunned from society. And the thing is those are all fearful states that are reactive with no plan. And they create short-term results. I love to operate out of a place of want. And I think that's one of the principles that does help, because want is abundant. You can do whatever you want, and want is enough. Like, I'm going to do this just because I want to. And that's enough. I don't need much more. And so once you set that vision, then all of a sudden you forward think, backwards plan. So you set the vision, then you set backwards plan. And once you backwards plan, you get it so detailed that you know the sound, you know the taste, you know the feel, you know exactly what's going to get you there to the best of your abilities. And you may not know exactly what the plan is. You'll learn along the way. But the best of your abilities to where you know where to start. And you get that all the way down to the day, to what you're going to do every single day to create that result. And then it becomes less about hope and motivation and whether or not you're going to get there, and more just about following the plan.
Yeah.
And that's where I think changes really start to make, because you lose those labels of what's good, bad, right, wrong, comfortable, uncomfortable, hard, or easy. And it's just about showing up, because it's what's going to create what you want.
Like, I feel like people talk about, they have that vision, and it's like, all right, I have no idea how to get to the top of the mountain. And people say, take that first couple steps. But what would you say to someone that doesn't even know what mountain they want? Like, where would you start with someone in your coaching program that doesn't have any type of vision? And it's like they're that lost college student that's like, I'm just going to go, and everything's diluted, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have your focus. How would you, bring in their focus?
Yeah, well, I was that guy. I didn't know what I was doing. And I came home from my mission. Like I said, my first coaching was with a financial advisor. And I was like, okay, I'll try financial advising. It looks like he's got it figured out. And I did that. I ventured down to financial advising. I did summer sales for 5 years, trying to go work for 4 months so then I could have 8, just to figure out what I wanted to do. That was it. And each year I did something different. I worked at Domino's. I joined the Utah State wrestling team, having never wrestled before. I wanted to know what I was made of. And I did everything I could to do that. And I just explored. And I think allowing yourself to explore and be curious, eventually you're going to arrive, right? Like when I met Brady, Brady then led me to another person who led me to another person who led me to another person who led me to another person. And all of a sudden that person had the answer that I needed. But had I not taken the courage to just continue to explore and not need an answer, was like, I'm just going to try to figure this out because when I do, it'll be cool.
Yeah. Huh. That's super interesting because it's like that mountain analogy. There you don't know the mountain. You're just kind of wandering for a little bit, and then you're looking out and you find some things that are a little bit more intriguing over here, a little bit more intriguing over here, and it slowly just gets you to your mountain as long as you're exploring. And like taking that Costco sample of, like Utah State Wrestling, or I'm curious, what came out of Utah State Wrestling for you?
Dude, a whole lot of losses, that's for sure. I got demolished. I got hurt a lot in that. I just was showing up to practice, and I heard these kid talking to one of the other. So this kid had won state, and he was talking to another kid in my class, and the other kid who had won state didn't want to wrestle. Yeah. And I said, I'll try. And they're like, have you ever wrestled? I was like, no, but I'll come do it. And I tried out and got on the team. And, 2 weeks later, I was in Montana at a D1 wrestling tournament, and I just was going to give it a go. There was these teams from Canada and Montana all over the place, and I lost every single match. Every single one. But, it was just a good experience for me to really know how resilient I am and how you can learn something, because I didn't know how to learn before. Learning how to learn is half the battle, and I just knew that if I showed up enough times, eventually I would get better. And I had never beaten anyone even at practice, and then the last week I beat the first guy at practice in a real match. So that was really exciting. So
there we go.
You learn along the way, and I never became the best, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was to learn how to wrestle. I did that.
Which college wrestling is one of the most insane sports, and technical strategy, all of that.
Oh, yeah.
So for you to dive in at that age is insane. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, and they don't teach you that much either in college, because all the guys already know, and like so they were like
12 years of experience.
Yeah, they're like, you get 2 hours of open wrestling, and just like me out there trying to figure it out. But, luckily the guys on the team were really cool and helpful, and would take the time to kind of teach me how to do some stuff.
It's, you brought up something that's important. You said half of any battle is learning how to learn. So what do you think it takes for someone to learn how to learn?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just walking into the unknown. You don't need to know. It's just being willing. Willingness is probably the number one word that I would use for that.
Willingness.
Yeah, just willingness to try and not have everything figured out, and not know exactly how it's going to turn out or what result you're going to get. Like, a lot of us like to take the have, do, be mentality. Once I have it, then I'll do it, then I'll become it. And what happens with that is you end up never starting or trying, and it a lot of times leaves us lost. Rather, I like to flip that on its head. Be, do, have.
Be, do, have.
First, I'm going to be the person, then I'll do the thing, and then I'll have the result. But I got to become the person first, and so I start there. How do I become the person? Like, let's take wrestling. If I want to become the person who knows how to wrestle, then I got to go wrestle.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go wrestle. I'm going to see if that's what I want to do. And, and then on a neuroscience level, what you're trying to create is what's called neuroplasticity. But here's where a lot of people get it wrong. With neuroplasticity, you think once a connection is made that you're just going to eliminate it once you stop doing the task. And it's not that way. That only happens with disease and old age.
And for someone who doesn't know neuroplasticity, explain a tiny bit what that is.
Yeah, so neuroplasticity in short is just creating new connections in the brain. It's where you're just basically, you do an action for long enough that your brain creates a connection that then becomes easier over time. Because here's what's happening. Once you create a connection in the brain, it starts to get wrapped with what's called myelin. Okay? Myelin is basically like electrical tape over electrical wires. It helps everything run smoother and faster. Okay. Once you get the myelin, then it gets wrapped with this thing called oligodendrocytes. And I know it's a big word. It's basically like this string that wraps it tighter and tighter and tighter. The tighter that string gets, the faster the process is. And it comes from familiarity. So the more familiar your body is with something, the better it's going to fire faster and become more automatic. Your brain has to, it takes less exertion to create the outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing when you have an old pathway of something you don't like, so let's say you have, you're very agreeable and you have people pleasing and you want to stop people pleasing so much. You want to be able to have some more independence, right? What you'll do is you'll start to notice the thoughts that are taking you there. And then what you'll do is start to create a new action pattern. You're not going to get rid of the old one. You're never going to get rid of those old patterns and habits and identities. They're a part of you. But what you'll do is you'll then create a new pathway that then becomes easier and overrides the old one. So you have to do something enough to create enough neuroplasticity to where that becomes easier. I like to relate it to it's as if a Jeep is going to go up a trail. And in the beginning, you got to go really slow because you're going over rocks and it's icky and uncomfortable and hard.
Yeah.
Right? But over time, the more that Jeep paves the trail, it gets easier and easier and easier until where you have a Lamborghini that can go really fast down the highway. And that's exactly what's happening in your body.
So what have been the biggest mental changes that you feel like have impacted you the most in your life through neuroplasticity? Like what have been those breaking moments that you've caused new patterns that have really affected who you are today?
Yeah, a lot of that's happened in the physical realm, I'll be honest. Because like I said, I was never that great at stuff.
Yeah.
And now I've been able to do some cool things for myself that I feel very proud of.
Amazing things.
And a lot of it was just being able to see myself as that person, right? Like I didn't know I was going to ever qualify for Boston. Like 2 years ago when I did it for the first time, I ran a 2:56 marathon. Leading up to that, I was very nervous. I didn't know if my body was capable of running that fast for that long. I showed up every single day, and I told myself, I built the training program, I forethought, I had the goal, I worked backwards, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'll just show up every day, and whatever I get on marathon day is what I get, but I'm going to show up every day. And I did. And I got the goal almost to a T. I envisioned myself crossing the finish line at a 2:56, and that's exactly when I crossed the finish line. And then right after that, 3 months later, I signed up for the first 100-mile race. And I didn't know how that was going to turn out. I had 3 months to train. I was very nervous.
3 months to train for a 100-mile marathon.
Yeah, I was very nervous. I mean, I had my marathon training as well, so that helped. But it was 3 months of ultra training, and I was very nervous. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know what mile 51 feels like. I don't know how I'm going to react, and I just showed up, and those were moments that built a lot of confidence in myself that helped me really understand, if one can do it, we all can do it, because I was never the one that was all that great at stuff.
Yeah.
But if one can do it, we all can do it. And as soon as I started to believe that in my bones, I started to just trust the process a whole lot more than I needed to trust my, past experiences.
Yeah. So I remember the first time I went to the gym just by myself. Obviously, I was looking nothing like you, and I'm still not there yet, But very first thing I did, and something I've learned, and what you're talking about with mentors, I just went to the biggest looking dudes in the gym, and I would go up and say, hey, look at me, I'm the scrawny dude that I want to become like you. What does it take? And they'd always give little tips, this and that. But more than anything, it seems to be in every aspect of life, there is a process. You just need to understand a system and a process of success. And one of my favorite ways to do that is through people that have 20 years of that system and success under their belt, and you don't have to go through all the trial and error that everyone decides to go through until they hire a mentor or get close with someone that wants to help them out.
100%.
So talk to me a little bit about processes and what are the universal laws that are important to you?
Oh, there's so many. Like one of them is the law of opposition, and we've talked about that. You know, you can't go to heaven if you're not willing to go to hell. Like that applies to everything in life. You're not going to grow strong muscles unless you tear them down. You tear them down first, then they regrow stronger, right? You're not going to be able to regrow your brain unless you're also willing to struggle a little bit. You're not going to gain new pathways unless you walk into the unknown, which is always uncomfortable because it's not who you are, but who you are isn't serving you anymore. So you have to be willing to go down that path. That's one of the ones that I also look at. But another one is like you said, I mean, I see the world as systematic. I think everything is, and there are laws that bind us to this earth that I believe that God is also bound to as well. And when you look at it from that perspective, Nick Saban says this to the Alabama football team all the time: choice is an illusion. It takes what it takes. If you really want to be good at anything that you do, choice is an illusion. It takes what it takes. So when you look at things from that perspective, right? I remember I was listening to this podcast with Alex Hormozy, and it was on the School of Greatness. And they asked Alex Hormozy, they said, if you want to make $1 billion, what would you have to do? And each answer, he's like, they're like, well, why aren't you at $1 billion? He's like, well, I'm not willing to take that risk, because every pro that he could have also had a risk associated with it. Everything. And he would go through each one of those, of how he would get there and what risk he would take and if he was willing to do it or not. And I think that's how it is. Like when you're looking, like it's like, okay, I really want to understand joy. Okay, well, am I willing to go through some hardship? Right? Like we all want to heal, but are we willing to give up what's making us sick?
Yeah, I think about two experiences. One, when my parents got divorced, that was one thing that essentially separated the family, but it brought us so much closer together. When my father passed away, I have a vivid memory when we're about to close his casket, and I have my favorite humans on earth all surrounding me, and we have the closest moment. And I have moments where when I start my weekly planning, I go through a couple moments of gratitude that I can look back and I feel so much love and I'm grateful for. It's a weird thing because probably the most horrific moment of my life was closing that casket, pretty much saying I'm never getting to see my dad again, you know. But at that same time, I'm so grateful that I got to go through that with four of my best brothers, my best friends, and my family. And so I just think that's so interesting, the power of that horrific experience that also gave me such a powerful, loving, and grateful experience that I'll never, I'll never forget.
No, that's awesome. I love that because it's so true. But here's one thing that I do want to preface. Just because you go through hardship doesn't mean you'll learn the lesson. That's one thing that doesn't apply to the laws. Hardship doesn't always equal growth.
Yeah.
Like you can watch hardship completely demolish somebody's life, and they can completely lose themselves in it because they want to become the victim, and it's all the perception and the belief of what surrounds the event. That this is the way the world works, that there's no other answer. And a lot of times it's because we're too stubborn to look. And that's where we become, stuck, because we're not willing to really understand that, like for example, when somebody has trauma, let's say someone's parents were really hard on them as a kid. One of the things that person has to accept in order to learn and grow is that I have been hurt and I too have hurt people. Because a lot of times that's what happens, is that generational trauma, and you don't understand how that's interacting with your life until you're willing to have that conversation where you can say to yourself, like, no, I was the problem there. And that's where the learning is, right? Death gives meaning to life, but only if we allow ourselves to learn the lesson through the grief, which is hard and dark and icky, and we don't want to deal with it. but that's what's going to give meaning to now your relationships with those who are there. Right?
That's powerful. The to make a diamond and to make carbon, they go through the exact same process, but the difference is hardening and becoming the diamond, or choosing to just be carbon. And so there's choice through hardship and trials, where it's like, I'm going to make this, a positive thing in my life, which it all comes down to perspective and what you want out of it. And if you're willing to go through the work.
Yeah. I mean, Tiger Woods said it best. He goes, if you quit after your first hardship, then you weren't ready to have the success anyways. And I may have botched that quote, but it's that exact idea. I mean, I remember when I was starting Neuromastery, right? Like, I was too stubborn. Like, I was in college. I did 3 years of finance, and I was too stubborn to see the other side of it, until my wife sat me down and she's like, Brock, what are you doing? You need to be working with people, because at the time I had people who would reach out to me and ask questions and want to know. And it seemed like mental health was always a big factor in my life. And she, the angel she is, sat down and said, Brock, what are you doing? And that was a pivotal moment, right? But I could have been stubborn and said, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So what did run through your head when she kind of calls you out? Like, hey, you're going down this road. And she probably knows you better than any human at that point, right? And she's like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, first thought was, nobody wants to listen to me anyways. Why would anybody want to listen to what I have to say? I don't know anything. I'm a poor college student on the wrestling team getting wrecked every day. Like, why would I want to do this? And first instinct is, I'm 3 years deep in a degree. Why would I switch right now? And then, with a little push, it was like, okay, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but let's try. And I said, hey, Kelsey, like, are you willing to sleep under a bridge if this doesn't work? Because my whole plan was, like, one day I was going to graduate and go work with my dad, and we were going to start our own company. My dad had started 2 successful companies, and that was going to be my route, and I was stoked about it.
Yeah.
But it just turned out that wasn't the path that I was supposed to go down. And I can feel that now looking back, but it was hard to see that in the moment, because I had to leave everything I knew. Like, I have 4 older brothers. They've all been very successful in what they've done. My dad's always been successful. I haven't been that successful. I've just showed up and basically did what I was told to do. And so, like, how was I going to do this? And I wanted my brothers to help me. I wanted my dad to help me. I wanted them to build this for me. I wanted them to give me the money and take away the pain. And all of that was like, when I first started and I started to have hardship, all I wanted was for someone to just take it away. And that's all I would look for, is like, when is somebody going to see what I'm doing and take away what the hardship that I'm going through? But I realized now, looking back, is if I wasn't willing to sleep under a bridge, I would have never been able to help anybody in my program at all, because I wouldn't understand it. Like, somebody could give me $1 million, but could I teach someone how to make $1 million then? No. And I don't do that. I'm a wellness coach who teaches mind and body resilience. But if I had not gone through hardship, I cannot teach anybody about hardship, because mine was taken from me. I needed those lessons.
Leading with experience. So as she's, calling you out right there, what was the why for you to jump ship completely?
Originally her. Like, my wife, it was rocky in the beginning, and I wanted to help her. And so I studied a lot. I read a lot of books. And when I say a lot, like, I think I did like 42 books in 3 months or so. Like, it was a lot. I was obsessed. And I wanted to help her. I wanted to be there for her. And I wanted to know how I could be the best support to her. And as I did that, I also realized that there was a lot of men that you could use my help. And, when I first put out a story, it was like, hey, I can do some physical training for you and I'll do some mindset stuff along the ways. But when I really started, my first client, who's now my business partner, was Cam. He needed my help. He was trying so hard and he was doing all these things, but there was something that I had. And one thing that I've realized, and I want to preface this, it wasn't like these people wouldn't have figured it out with or without me. I was not like the one lever that was going to change their life, and I don't see myself as that. I'm just grateful that I get to be there for the journey, because being able to be a part of that journey is something that I hold near and dear to my heart, and I'm just grateful for the experience. But that's where I started to find a lot of momentum. Was I started to see the changes that I actually could make, and I built some momentum there. And then in that, I just decided that this is what I was going to do, and I don't know how I'm going to do it or what's going to happen, but come hell or high water, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. So what have you figured out, and why is it good to have someone like you throughout their journey of mental health and physical health?
So one thing that I've figured out is how to systematically change the brain that can also change behavior. I know that. I've been able to repeat that. I'm not saying I know 100% of it, and there's so much, like I maybe know 3% of what goes on in the brain, but I do know it works. I know it can help people. I understand emotions, and I understand how to relate to pain. And it's not that I can relate in the sense that I know what you've been through because I've been what you've been through. I don't. But I know my pain. And in my pain, I can understand your pain. Because anybody who really understands pain, if you try to compare and say one is worse than the other, it means you have not gone deep enough. Like I have a mentor right now, his name is Chad Hymas. He is a giant amongst men, and I was talking to him, and he's in a wheelchair. He broke his neck at 27 years old, and he has had to live almost his adult life in a wheelchair, and he relates his pain to mine. He puts us on the same level because he understands it. There's wisdom in his bones about everything that he's been through. And if I can give some portion of that to my clients, then that just helps us gain a bond that becomes unbreakable. And in that bond, you take a hurt dog and you put him in a healthy pack. You automatically start to surround yourself with that identity.
What do you feel like a healthy pack looks like?
So a healthy pack looks like to me is just peace. It's just you have peace with yourself. That when what you do, what you think, and what you say are the same. That's all. And it's not that you get things right or you get them perfect or that results always turn out for you. It's just that when you do make a decision, you know why you made the decision. And you know how to repeat processes in your life of things that do work. Because you know what you did, you know why you said what you said, and you know why you thought what you thought, and you know where it came from. So if it didn't work getting you to where you wanted to go, you know how to adjust. And that's all.
So let's go into that a little bit. A couple different areas with building your own company. You have to have a bunch of goals, and you have to aspire to a lot, right? I think every entrepreneur to some level or not is a little bit of a psychopath, because you have to be in this world. And if you're going to go into it, you're going to be drug in the dirt for a little bit. It depends on how quick you can figure out those systems and processes. My ideology with goal setting is shoot for the moon and you're more likely to hit the stars. So I'll shoot, and my goals will sound outrageous to a lot of people, and they probably are. But to me, that's the only way that I will get outrageous results that people won't typically get. So with saying what you'll do and with goal setting, how do you put that all together for people?
Yeah, I mean, it's much better to fail at the level of your future self than it is to fail at the level of your current self. So what I typically do is, like, when I started Neuromastery, I thought, what's the coolest possible life that I could create? That was my thought process. What would I love showing up to every single day, and what's the coolest possible thing that I could do? And that's what I'll do. So in that, what I did is I started to build it. I envisioned it. I started to design it. I knew what it looked like, tasted like, felt like. I knew exactly what that experience was going to be for me. Then I reverse engineered it back all the way to the day. And I know exactly what I do as I show up that's going to build that. And what milestones are going to tell me if I'm on track or if I'm not. So that way everything can be measured. On whether or not I showed up, it can be measured with an easy yes or an easy no. And it's not saying that a yes is better than a no, but if it's a no, it means I need to adjust. And so that's kind of how I look at, when I'm looking at goals, and I try not to make too many. Like, if you have more than 3 to 4 goals, you have none. You're too diluted. And so you really got to get focused and intentional about what it is, because think about it. If you're going to shoot for the moon, like, it's great to say it, but what risks have to come into place to build that? And I think that's the part where people don't consider. Is it's like, I know exactly what it's going to take for me to get to where I want to go. And I don't know exactly the path, but I know the risks associated because I've studied it. I found people that have done what I want to do. I've heard about their journey and I know what that looks like. And so now I'm going to relentlessly pursue that. For me and Kelsey, that meant, possibly sleeping under a bridge. We never luckily have had to do that, but we definitely have given up, quite a bit of cash and opportunities and blessings in our life because of the journey we've chosen. And we knew that going in, though. There was proper expectation set because that's always associated. It's not just, it's like, okay, if I want to go to the moon, well, then that's my only goal. It's like, if I really want to go that far, what are the risks?
Yeah, it's those first couple years, it's like, you know what, if I would have stepped, or for example, like, you could have stayed with finance, you could have worked with your dad, and each of these steps, it's like, it's comfortable success, right? And you decided to go for it, which, makes it way rocky at the start. What have been some of your favorite successes with neuromastery?
One we're doing right now. It hasn't happened yet, but I hope it's a success. But it's been a lot of fun. It already has been a success in my book. It's called the Connect and Conquer Festival. Like, I've never filled a room with more than 30 people, ever. Right? Like, that's, and we set this goal to get 300 in a room where we're going to build a festival.
10xing it.
And that was the idea. And I knew I couldn't do it by myself. And so this was a big success. I decided that I was going to build the room who could put that together because I knew I wasn't capable at the time. I didn't have the reach. So what am I going to do? I started to get, I got Trevor Farnes, owner of Mountain Hops, to come be involved. I got, John Moore with the Here Brotherhood to come be involved, who has an audience. Sean Finnegan with Tax Hive. I got, Ben Checkets with Roan, and I built this board and said, hey, let's do this, presented the idea. And then all of a sudden it's going to come to fruition. Another one is just, your first client success story. Like, it was so cool when watching your childhood friend lose 50 pounds and be absolutely jacked and proud of who he is, sharing the pictures, and seeing all your clients start to really create progress. And when you get those testimonial videos, the random ones that they just send you, it's like, all right, I'm in this for way long now,
Yeah, that is amazing. First successful project, at least for me in business, is like euphoric.
Yeah.
And to take something that you literally created out of thin air to make a successful product that was loved and you made money from it's
a wild journey.
It's amazing. For me, starting a business has been the most godlike experience that I've been through. And I'm excited for more of it. I feel like Casey Baugh talks about it too, that this is a spiritual game. Like,
it is.
I will experience more spiritual growth growing a business than sometimes like going to church every week. Like, I'll feel a difference in my connection with God. Seriously, has been through the roof. But it's probably because growing a business has taken me to like harder lows and hardship than I've gone through in other areas.
Yeah.
But the value and the worth is
huge.
Amazing.
Well, when you're an entrepreneur, you're forced to be a creator, just like God, right? You can't be reactive. When you go to work every day, when you have a job where someone's paying you, you're reactive. You're just giving the work that's given to you, finishing it, and moving forward. But when you're an entrepreneur, nobody cares. Like, nobody cares what you do. They don't care if you're successful and they don't care if you fail. Like, it's all on you. And so you're forced to create problems for yourself and then solve those problems that you created and hope that the problem you're solving is one worthwhile. And that's the journey.
It's beautiful. How did starting Neuromastery affect your marriage with Kelsey?
I mean, Kelsey's a saint.
Yeah.
She's been there from the get, and she's been all for it. I mean, that doesn't mean there hasn't been hardship and fights and everything in between. But, at the end of the day, if she wasn't here, it wouldn't have happened. Like that pivotal moment where she sat me down and said, Brock, what are you doing? Like that didn't stop that day. Like there was one time we were going to buy a house and I was gung-ho. I was like, yeah, we are getting a house and I don't care. We didn't know how we were going to make it work. We didn't know how we were going to find the money. We didn't know anything. I was just like, we're doing it. And we had it all worked out and we were going to literally close. And she comes to me one night bawling and she just says, hey, Brock, like we can't do this. We can't get this house because that's just going to put pressure on you and it's going to take away from Neuromastery and it will come between the house and Neuromastery and I don't want to have to make you make that choice. And so, I mean, as far as marriage goes, I think nothing's brought us closer. Like there's times when I'm doing a challenge. There's one in particular that is close to my heart. So I was training for my 100-miler and I was doing a 4x4x48 where you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. And I didn't ask her to do this, but she got on a bike, pregnant, with our baby, and rode 48 miles with me every 4 hours for 48 hours. And she's been there from the start. There's been runs where there was one where I was out really late and we had just eaten like trash all day, and I was throwing up every 3 steps of the run. And she called me and was on the phone the whole time. And she just listened to me. Just complain, throw up, complain, throw up for 6 miles for a full hour late at night. Like she wanted to go to bed. She's still pregnant. Like she's been there from the get and like she holds down the fort. Like think about it this way. When I ran my second 50 miler, it was 3 days after she gave birth and she was cheering for me on the side of the street. When I ran my 100-miler, this was 3 weeks after she gave birth, still hurting. She drove down to Moab in a camper van and slept in it with our newborn baby just to support me. She took care of that whole thing 3 weeks after giving birth. Now here we are, and I'm doing Ironman training, and she's still, like, she is full-time videographer for Neuromastery. She gave up her whole career and everything to do this. Like, obviously she loves videography and she's dang good at what she does, but she did all of that to be a part of this journey, to be able to be there, and so we can spend time. And while, like, mind you should see how we make these videos. She's in a car driving with a kid crying in the back while I'm outside running and she's filming everything. Or she's at an event taking care of a kid while trying to get the video and make sure everybody's having a good time.
So what does that mean to you that she's willing to do that?
Oh, there's just some debts you can't repay.
Yeah, that's amazing support. That's a dream. What's the legacy that you really want to leave behind?
I just hope that people, for those who do want to grow, that they understand the path, that they understand there's tools, there's resources, there's help. For those that really want it, the opportunity's there. And it's just a matter of putting yourself around the people that can help you, because you don't have to be alone. You don't have to live in quiet desperation. Depression doesn't have to be your normal. Neither does anxiety. Your normal can be peace and love and abundance and kindness. It's just understanding how that's created.
It's powerful. I don't know how many books you've read, but it sounds like you've read numerous books from every aspect. So give 2 your favorite business books and 2 your favorite health books.
Two of my favorite business books and health books. Well, Alex Hormozy takes the cake on business books, man. You gotta read. If you're wanting to start a business, you gotta read $100 million offers and $100 million leads. Those books will change the way you view everything and how you run the business. I mean, I think those. I know they're two books, but they've been the best business books that I've read, and I go back to them often on how to make money. The other one is Selling Like Crazy by Sabri Subi. That's a good one. Business book. I know that's three too many, but very similar. Health books. One book that every person needs to read on the planet Earth is Dopamine Nation. Because your dopamine, everybody thinks it's the pleasure chemical, and it is in the pleasure systems of the brain. But dopamine is more than anything a currency, and it's the motivator that causes you to act. And if you don't understand how it's causing you to act or what it's causing you to do, you don't understand your behavior. And that book outlines and details it very thoroughly and clearly to where you can understand it on a very deep level. So Dopamine Nation. The other one is The Untethered Soul. That one really helps you understand your emotions and just how powerful all of them are. Because we like to reject some and we deem some as good, some as bad, just because one's more comfortable than the other. But all your emotions, when truly understood, you realize that they're all there for your benefit, even the icky ones. And if you can sit there with them and give them a seat at the table, they can speak to you in wild ways. And so those two books, I think, are very powerful.
Nice. Today, it's been a complete honor. What you brought to the table to so many. One, I think your power to be vulnerable. That's probably has to be a foundational effect that really transforms and helps the men you're working with. And two, your knowledge about how to change your physique and get through trauma and your emotion is incredible. And more people need to hear what you have going on. And so where's the best place where people can find you?
It's neuromasterycoach.com if you want to learn more about the program or come work with me one-on-one or come be a part of the community. We have options, and those are great. We'd love to have you there.
Perfect. Anything else you want to say to our audience?
Just don't be afraid. Once, passion comes on the other side of pain. And so just don't be afraid of pain. Go towards it. It's going to be okay, I promise. And you'll realize it's not so scary. And life becomes a whole lot more free.
Love that. The thought process behind fear and pain, I think in most of the world is very incorrect of how, I guess I'm not anyone to say how a perspective should be, but I've found so much benefit and so much success in areas of life when I've been willing to be free and open to pain and fear and just getting through those first couple steps. It's always been worth it. But Brock, you've been amazing to have on, and it has been a complete pleasure.
Pleasure's mine. I'm happy to be here.
Well, that's a podcast, baby.